Okay, great. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So again, thanks for joining us here today. I'm Ed Matos from NEIF, VP of Business Development here. We have Peter Troast, co-founder and CEO at Energy Circle. And this is the March Madness installment of the Go Greener Academy. So I hope everyone is doing well, getting some nicer spring weather. And yeah, so I kind of want to start off here by saying we're very excited to have Peter as a guest. I'll give you a little background. I've known Peter quite some time. I've been in the industry myself, probably 13 years. And when I started in the industry, I built a contracting company with a few friends of mine out in Long Island, and we were young and we were hustling, and we built up a pretty big company. And at one point we said, wow, we had a company running our website and our marketing. We said, this just isn't going too well. And we found Peter and Energy Circle, and we switched to them, and it was amazing. So they did all of our website, our marketing, our digital marketing, lead customer acquisition, and in my opinion, they're the best in the business, and for what we do, and in the HVAC and home performance. And I know they've gotten a lot even more into solar. And so I just kind of want to say firsthand, anyone, this isn't meant to be an endorsement for Energy Circle, but I have to do it. I can speak from experience. If anyone out there is looking for new website creation, lead acquisition via social media and PPC and SEO and all of these things, they are excellent firm and a sort of a one-stop shop for all of that. And so please check out Energy Circle after this, and feel free to reach out to them. They'll even give you sort of a quick rundown of where you stand in their eyes based on your current website and marketing and what they may be able to do for you. Today Peter is going to be kind of running the show here. I'm just going to sort of sit back, maybe ask a few questions, but I was logged in to see this same presentation. Another thing Energy Circle does is host their own webinar series on a month. Is it monthly, Peter?
Pretty much every other week. So
okay. So bi-weekly. Yep. Would definitely highly recommend you check that out too. They have a lot of interesting topics. I sort of refer to Peter as the data guru, as you're about to see here in a little bit, with regards to Google trends and search trends, and sort of just like we're talking about consumer awareness, which is such an interesting angle for us all to think about as contractors, as to understand again sort of what's happening on the other side of the computer screen. What are people doing? What are they searching for? How much awareness is out there or is not out there? And that can really help inform your business. So I listened into this talk about a month ago through their webinar series, and immediately called them to say, hey, I would love for you to do this for our group, because I just think it's super interesting. We all know right now electrification is the big buzzword, and there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to it. It's not just as simple as like, oh, let's just electrify everything. And so I'm going to let Peter start in. A lot of interesting information. If you have any questions, please chat them in the Q&A. We'll definitely leave some time for Q&A at the end. And yeah, go ahead. Take it away, Peter.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ed. It was great, great reminiscing there a little bit about our days back in Long Island. That was those were awesome times. That was you guys. You were working for an amazing company that was really a true pioneer. So made our work a lot easier. So
appreciate that.
Yeah, March Madness. I'm not doing so well so far. Darn Princeton wrecked my bracket. So
you and a lot of people.
So good. Well, let me share my screen. I got some slides here to show, and so let me just find the right thing to share. There we go. Is that looking okay? Yeah, so thank you very much for having
Looks
me,
good, Peter. Looks
and
good.
good to see all of you, or be with all of you. You know, as Ed said, I think you can't turn around these days without hearing about electrification or electrify everything and so forth. And so what I'm trying to do today is to try to ground all of this hullabaloo that we kind of are hearing about constantly in the reality of like homeowners, right? So what are consumers actually thinking about it? And so that's sort of the nature of it. And as Ed said, you'll see some data, and I'll try to be not overwhelm you with too much of that, but at the same time try to explain what it is we're seeing. I did want to say just briefly, so we have an all-electric office at Energy Circle, and the story of this is, we were 7 years ago, we're moving to new space. It's a gut rehab. We have the option of working with the landlord to decide what kind of energy system we wanted. There was gas to the building. We sort of faced some choices. And, at the end, after looking through it and sort of just really weighing primarily from an economic standpoint, like what would it be if we heated with gas versus went all electric. And, ultimately we decided on this VRF system. It's a Fujitsu system. And then the blue box you see there on the right is a Ventacity HRV, so heat recovery ventilation system. And so it's got a separately ducted air quality system. And that was really the driver, right? As much as we care and, we believe that climate change is a real issue, what really drove us here was indoor air quality. And that was what took us down the road of, it's really a better, more cohesive system if we can have this separately ducted HRV system alongside of, the ducted heating and cooling system. And so that's what led us there. It turned out, even though we were kind of guessing at the time, doing our best to estimate it, that this has been a very wise economic decision. It cost a bit more. That's in our rent in the upfront stage, but in terms of what our energy costs have been, we've done really well. So, point being here that there's lots and lots of reasons why why electric is going, especially I think in the commercial space. There's just a lot of sort of building and construction efficiencies associated with all electric systems, and they're really exploding there. So what I wanted to do today is just first, I'll start with just kind of what's the current state of awareness, right? And we'll use Google Trends data to try to do this. I think there's some very important regional differences around this whole topic that we tend to sort of ignore sometimes. And then most importantly, what can you do to identify and target this unique breed of buyer? So, as we all know, there's, lots of road, pathways into electrification, right? In northern climates where I'm from in Maine, where obviously NEIF has been, very strong, we've got lots of oil and we've got no air conditioning historically. And so, a ductless mini split or two in a house as an overlay to an oil system is a very attractive thing. And the state of Maine just crossed like 100,000 heat pump installations. So very, very different. But I think one of the interesting things here is this point at the bottom of the slide, which is who is buying electrification retrofits based on a sort of set of personal values, right? It's one thing to live in the state of Maine, never had air conditioning, it's getting hotter. I want cooling in the summer. It's another thing to say, for my own personal values, any homeowner, I want to move in the direction of electrification because I believe in it. And so that, that's sort of what we're kind of, thinking about. And the point of all this, I think from all of our standpoint as contracting work, is that the task of retrofitting a home to all electric, generally speaking, is a very good, comprehensive job, right? If you're taking out the whatever the heating system is and replacing it with heat pumps. If you're taking a traditional electric or a gas water heater, replacing it with a heat pump water heater. If you're moving, a traditional air conditioning system to a heat pump air conditioning system, and then adding all the other elements associated with electric, from solar to car charging, to storage, to, this electrical upgrades, to whatever appliances, induction stoves and so forth, all of that taken together, if someone is really going in that, wants to go down that road, it's a very good contracting job, right? Very comprehensive, high ticket value. There's a lot there, and particularly people, who are motivated to do this for sort of altruistic reasons, tend to have a little bit more price tolerance about what it is they're doing. So it's, set aside where you stand on the ideological scale, or even from a building science standpoint. There's lots of good arguments why, furnaces make a lot of sense in lots of parts of the country. All of that aside, what we're trying to do is take advantage of this emerging market to the extent that it's there for the kinds of homeowners that want this, right? And so that's really kind of the sort of question I'm trying to answer today is what's that like? So a little bit about this, more on this kind of current state of awareness. So, you can't turn around, as I said in the beginning, without sort of hearing about this, this sort of, drive towards electrification, right? And a lot of it is, at the very kind of high national level. This guide can help you save money and fight climate change, is New York Times, the most broadly read major media publication that's out there, talking about that, talking about the IRA. It's just kind of everywhere. You hear this term, electrify everything, quite a lot. So the question is, if it's getting more and more attention at the sort of press level and kind of out in the general milieu of what people are talking about, what's that translate to, for all of us? One of the challenges of this at the policy level is classic wonk talk, right? This happens so often to us in sort of home performance and or building science, where we get sort of all tied up in these super geeky terms: beneficial electrification, strategic electrification, decarbonization, home electrification, electrify everything. And so there's all of that out there, and what we're trying to figure out is, okay, these are obviously and clearly not terms that a typical homeowner is going to be using or thinking about. What's going on in the minds of homeowners? And so to get at that question, one source of data is Google Trends, right? And so what Google Trends does is take a look at a particular search term over a period of time, and the vertical axis in this case is sometimes a little confusing to people. It's an index, like 0 to 100, based on interest over time. And just to be clear, when you look at, I know some of these slides are kind of small, we'll get into some bigger versions of them in a second, but when you say to Google how many people are searching for beneficial electrification or strategic electrification, et cetera, what Google's doing is aggregating a whole bunch of kind of related search terms about that, right? And on the horizontal axis, what I'm using here, and it's a couple different scales, but this gives us like 14 years of data from like all the way back, and so it's it's interesting to see from a trend standpoint. So in 2019, all these geeky wonky terms, including, by the way, electrify your home, just didn't even, there's not enough data for them to even register. And it's only really in this, lower graph on the right that, starting in about 2016, that any of these terms started to have any particular kind of relevance. So now what I'm doing, and this is one of the cool things about Google Trends, is that it allows you to compare different things and see them on a relative scale. And so the three search terms here are electrification, which is the blue, gas to electric, right, which is the red, and then decarbonization, which is the yellow. And so again, long time frame, 2004 to present, and you get a sense here that in pretty much all of these cases of all three of these buckets of search terms, the trend of the graph is obviously moving up. And I think particularly when you look at gas to electric, you see a really sort of pronounced thing. And sometimes these graphs are sort of squat, right, in the sense that but when you start to move from, what Google would call a 25 index to a 75, 100 index, those are massive changes, right? Those are hugely significant changes. So, now we're trying to get closer to, and I've shrunk the time frame now to 5 years to try to get a sense of, okay, is there, what can we learn about kind of these more recent times? And so I'm using the term electrification, kind of the most general sense, right? And then home electrification, trying to get at what a homeowner might be thinking about in there. And so what you get here is, in 5 years, the home electrification piece is tiny, right? It's relative to the overall category of electrification. It's really, really small, and sort of, not that on the radar. So kind of the point here is that, look, this is still a very unique niche, but it is a niche that, as you'll see in some other slides here, is really starting to change to a certain extent. So the other thing that we can see, and this is within these, within these search terms, is, let's say, around this concept of electrification, what are all the sub search terms that are driving that? And when you see Google say that a search term has changed, in a category called breakout over that period of time, so in this case, 5 years, that means the search term has grown more than 5,000%. So it's significant, massive growth. But the point of this is, if you look at the search terms that are getting used more often than not around this overall topic of electrification, you can scan down this list, and what you see is not very much that is related to the idea that a homeowner might be thinking, I want this for my home, right? So you've got expos, you've got cars. For some reason, the Genesis, G80 has gotten all this kind of popularity. You've got, conferences like the Electrify Expo and the Electrify Expo Seattle. You've got the nonprofit organization Electrify America, et cetera, et cetera. So the point here is that within the sort of general bucket of electrification in its simplest sense, there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't relate to us at all, right? That people are thinking about cars and various kind of other things. And so that is just the reality of it. So now what I wanted to do is add into the electrification and home electrification heat pumps. And so the yellow in this case is heat pumps. And, I think as most of us know, the sort of primary first step that whether it's driven by a desire for electrification or it's just driven by, I want heat pumps for comfort reasons, the heat pump category is much larger. And is experiencing some really upward growth over the course of like the last year. This is a 5-year time frame. So basically where you start to see that, that graph really start to move in the yellow, that's literally, basically over the course of the last 18 months or so. So things are really starting to move. And I'm not saying they're not moving in the other categories, but this is where the value of this Google Trends data tends to really bring itself home, because you look at something like heat pumps relative to the term home electrification, and it's not, we're not even on the same playing field, right? This is just massively different. Now what I wanted to do is go into some of the specific categories of overall heat pumps, and there's really sort of I threw a bunch of other terms in here, heat pumps, ductless heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, mini split AC, and induction cooking. And there's some interesting things here. One of the things you'll notice, and for example, if you just call out the green graph, which is the mini split AC, which is by the way, one of the largest of the search terms in the overall category, what you see, and this is a 5-year graph, is seasonality, right? And not surprisingly, because the term AC is in there. But one of the things that's unique about the sort of way people, homeowners, just sort of untrained people think about heat pumps in general is usually either in the category of, they call it a heat pump, they call it ductless, or they call it mini split. And what's interesting, and there's a lot of regional variation to that whole point, but what's interesting is that both the ductless category as well as the mini split category are very seasonal and very summer oriented, whereas the heat pump one, which you can see kind of in the blue, and I know there's a lot of lines in there, has a bit kind of less seasonality. So that's it. It's a little hard to see the yellow line, which is the heat pump water heaters, but it's again getting a lot more attention. I'm shifting now to some tools that we use to kind of assess this volume of kind of search for these terms, right? And so the first, this is a tool that's called SEMrush. We spent a lot of money to have it, and what we're looking at here is keyword variations, questions, and then related keywords around the term electrification. If you start with the keyword variations on the left, essentially what you see is what I said before, which is a lot of confusion, right? There's people are thinking about the Rural Electrification Administration. This is going all the way back to, people are still searching for stuff that got started in the New Deal in the 30s, right? So very confusing. The middle is what we tend to really start to get very interested in, because particularly in a new, a category like heat pumps or electrification, people tend to have lots of questions, right? And so one way to capture search is really to be responsive to those questions. So we're very sort of bent on that. It's interesting, this is around this term, they detect about 259 question variations. That's pretty reasonable. And then what you see on the far right is the related keywords. So the idea here is is how many different ways do people think about this topic? And again, this is, about 253. The first one on there, I don't know if you can all see that. It's pretty funny. It's electrification. It's the primary volume. So just basic fundamental misspelling. So it's pretty funny. Now, so this is the same set of information about three terms that are getting us a lot closer to what a homeowner might be thinking about. So electrify my home, all electric home, and home electrification. And the key point here is, electrify my home, very, very small number of keyword variations, no questions, it's just undetectable, but quite a lot of keyword variation, which means there is some attention going into it. Of all of these, the all electric home is the one that really tends to get the most interest and the most volume. So lots of keyword variations, a fair number of questions, a fair number of related keywords. And then lastly, home electrification, which again, much smaller than all electric home, but sort of getting there. So again, I sort of am, beating up a little bit, I think, on the category here, but this is the reality of how most of the great unwashed people are thinking about this topic. There's a lot of data on this, and I just want to, I don't think it's necessary to go super deep on it, but what we're looking at here is all of the Google paid search data that Energy Circle manages on behalf of clients across the country doing this. And so this is all of that data kind of aggregated. And the main point of this is the top is 2021 versus 2022. And just the key thing to see in every single one of these categories, whether it's the number of clicks, whether it's the number of conversions or the kind of conversion rate, there is just massive growth, right? Conversions are up 305%. Conversion rate, and this is when we say conversion rate, this is the holy grail of kind of internet marketing. You get 100 people to land on a web page. How many of those people become a lead? And we're sort of, over the course of 2022, we're accomplishing almost 30% conversion rates, reflecting that people are really excited about this. So, and then the bottom one was just trying to get a gauge of, okay, now in August of last year, the IRA passes. It's got all this attention to electric, products, and what kind of change. And again, more of the same, which is just everything continues to grow really rapidly. So,
Hey, Peter, quick question
Yeah.
for you.
yeah,
So, obviously, super interesting to see how much heat pumps has just grown.
yeah,
And I think there's a lot of reasons why different state pushes towards it, and like you said, the media. But in relation to solar, which I think was probably in the, it's electrify, but it came, around 2010, just it was such, I mean, the search for that was astronomical. Is heat pumps even close to that now, or is it still like within?
yeah. It's probably not where solar. Solar's obviously been around a long time, Ed, as you said, and then I think in particular, what the IRA did for solar was really take the fog away from the all the issues about the tax credit, right? So, remember before the IRA, the tax credit was, had been 30% and then was kind of in this gradual step down. And there was a great deal of uncertainty about what was going to happen. And then IRA passes, it's back to 30%. It's going to be 30% for 10 years. And so that definitely caused, sort of a, like in some ways a reawakening, but at the same time, solar's got lots of variability around the country and so forth. But it's still, and when we say solar, right, we've got to be really careful because what people search for is solar panels or solar installer or whatever it may be. But I think solar, I think, is still, probably magnitudes ahead of where heat pumps are. But on a, again, we'll get to this in just a second. On a regional level, the heat pumps have, in some places like in the north, and obviously, Ed, the main market, intimately, there's just been a real tipping point here, right? I mean, everybody, you can't drive around and not see, outdoor units. All your neighbors have them. I've got one. I can't see it. It's right above the thing behind me. They work, and the buzz about them is fantastic. And even the super cold polar vortex we had, a few weeks ago, like they performed admirably through that. And so you just, it's classic word of mouth, right? More people have them, more people are saying, wow, this is fantastic. Also, by the way, I've finally got cooling, in a building that never had it before. So it's super on the rise. That cool? That answer the question? So this is a good segue, though, to talking a little bit about some of the regional kinds of issues, because there's a lot of difference here. And, the most important thing, and sometimes my friends and clients in the South, sort of laugh at us because, it's always been electric in the South, right? There's, in places with lower heating loads, the systems have always kind of been electric. They've always been heat pumps. And so, sometimes you talk to somebody in Alabama and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's, when did you guys up north figure out about this heat pump thing, right? So just important to know that, that when you look around the country, you've got the Southeast, which is very, dominantly electric. You've got the Northwest, particularly Washington State, very dominantly electric because of all the low cost hydro power. Arizona, is turns out to be big, and so it is what we're talking about here today, and all the data that I've shown you up until now is the whole country, right? And so it doesn't parse any of that stuff out at all. What's particularly important, I think, to say on these, the two big buckets of terms, home electrification and heat pumps, is there's some very kind of significant sort of regionality. The home electrification for the moment is a California story, right? And so that is driven, in part by incentives, right? California has been very aggressive about moving in the direction of of incentivizing electric. So like, for example, in Sacramento, which has got a municipal utility district that is all electric, right? And so they're competing in that case with PG&E that sells the gas. They're super aggressive with incentives. At one point, you could get $13,500 in rebates for making a move towards a lot of electric things. So for the moment, this idea of electrification in and of itself is very much a California trend, whereas the heat pumps is much more national, right? I mean, even though you see Maine in this sort of bright red and Vermont kind of in bright red because of the nature of those states as having heavy oil dependency and this concept of you just overlay, like a single ductless head would sort of add some cooling and so forth. For the most part, it's relatively even, across the country. You see a little bit of darker red in the Northwest, again, partially because of low electric rates and so forth. So it is very much a kind of a regional thing. A few weeks ago, Ed mentioned the Energy Circle webinar series, and you can just go to energycircle.com and you'll see the links to the webinars. But one of the things we did on January 25th is we had two people from California, one contractor who has essentially, this is Keith O'Hara. Some of you may have seen him speak at the Home Performance Conference, runs a contracting company in the Bay Area, has for 5 years, without necessarily selling it has gone completely all electric. And then Charlie Cormany, who is the executive director of Efficiency First California. And it was just very interesting to see in that state, which has really kind of led the charge, that it's now kind of de facto, right? There's just not a lot of questions. Keith was saying that homeowners don't even really ask him, if there's, about, gas or furnaces. It just become kind of that way. So that's all of the past webinars that we have are all free, and you can just go and look at those. It's important also to say that some of what's driven California is bans, right? So these cities up and down the Bay Area in California have banned new gas hookups, right? So that has been a significant driver of this. New York, is doing the same, and these things are, there's to some degree these things are spreading around the country, but at the same time, as we all know, there's significant pushback, right? The gas industry is not lying down about this stuff, and so in all of these red states, the legislation has passed that prohibits gas bans. So it's a ban on gas bans, right? So as much as there's this, activity going on in, the California, Washington, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, et cetera, there's a giant chunks of the country that are essentially prohibiting this idea of bans on gas. So it's, again, more to the point of kind of crazy regionality. You get a sense here of that. So where we are seeing traction, right, in around the country are first and foremost the places that have aggressive electrification incentives, right? And so California, Massachusetts really are at the forefront of this, from being big states and states that have aggressive incentives. But what's about to happen, is going to happen over the course of the end of this year and the beginning of 2024, is that the IRA incentives, which are all very tilted towards electric products, are going to start to come into play. And so the location and sort of the spread of these incentives is going to be much more even across the country. Now, I think we all kind of know, and we can talk as much as we want to about the IRA. Not every state necessarily is going to take the money, right? So it doesn't, and that some states are just, their state energy offices are just too small, right? I mean, Arizona has one person, and the chances of them, a big state like that, which is going to get, I think I don't know, $500 million from the IRA, standing up a program, it just may not happen, right? So there, but whereas, and then the other big issue, of course, with the IRA is the timing issue, right? We're generally feeling like at the very, very best in states that are, already have programs up and running, maybe there'll be some dollars for the rebates money in the fourth quarter, but the consensus seems to be for most of the country, it's going to be early next year. So that'll even some of this out. And of course, there's also the whole question of layering and stacking of incentives. Massachusetts, California have both sort of indicated you're going to be able to use both, right? And there's tons of sort of state, local, regional energy network sort of level incentives in California, and it looks like, in some cases you may be able to stack those with the federal IRA incentive. So you're going to again have some of these really aggressive things. The second big category is the states that have had aggressive heat pump programs, right? And so, as I said before, many of the New England states, Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine, in particular, have been really kind of aggressive with their own programs about heat pumps and have kind of gotten over to this tipping point. The Northwest has been, very aggressive about them. And then, of course, any place that has a sort of a heavy usage of oil and propane, because of that advantage of cost advantage, as well as the idea of providing some cooling that may not have existed before. And then the third major category, and this is really kind of to that early point in the when I first was getting started, about places where there are significant numbers of people that are motivated by the idea of electrification or I want the fossil fuels out of my house. This has been very much a California phenomenon, to a certain extent, a Massachusetts phenomenon, and where we see it elsewhere tends to be sort of college towns. We have a client in Princeton, New Jersey, and that's a sort of highly educated, right, and wealthy, in addition to that community, and so what you're seeing there is kind of some of those kinds of towns that are that are doing that. From a standpoint of where to put the focus now, right, and so this is we're Energy Circle is a digital marketing firm, so a lot of what we're thinking about is how do we get to a place where we're winning organic search for the growth in all these search terms. And the simple sort of, or maybe oversimplified way to think about the complicated thing called SEO is really just about, do you have the content on your website to be able to attract the people that are starting to to more and more and more to search around these terms? And we've had some amazing kind of case studies where we had the privilege, of working with some clients that said, 3 and 4 and 5 years ago, like, I see this heat pump thing coming. I want to go all in on heat pumps. And we've kind of created, a aggressive content strategy. So not, crazy aggressive, 26 new pieces of content and blog posts and so forth per year for a few years. And a couple of these companies are running their entire business off of organic search, right? They just don't need anything else. They don't need Google ads. They don't almost need anything else because of so much traffic coming, because they got there first. So the point here is that first mover advantage is at your disposal if you want to do it. Secondarily, and you saw all of my data about about home electrification and how at the moment it's not a big deal. But again, my point here is first mover advantage is there. So if you want to make a bet that this is going to start to happen, then then starting to sprinkle in content and just even keywording about home electrification, I think it's a fairly easy and a fairly worthwhile thing. So on to now some marketing stuff, and I'll just wrap it up with this. Is the key thing we're trying to think about here is how to identify and target this unique category of person that might be interested in electrification for its, for its own sake. And the bottom line is it's a very unique type of homeowner, right? This is, it's a ideological person. It's a person who, is probably more educated than your average person. So it's fairly unique. Bottom line, if you boil it all down, very green leaning, highly educated, and typically fairly high income, right? So that's the that's the audience. And I mentioned, for example, Princeton, New Jersey, like we're having great success, in that market because of the, fitting the, hitting all these check boxes, right? Very green, highly educated, and have money. What we think the best target audiences are in terms of where this is. So first and foremost, solar is kind of the lead, right? So anyone who has solar, meaning they've got electricity, they're generating electricity on their roof. It is on their minds, and it's the leap towards why would I want all my heating and cooling to be electric when you're making electricity on your roof is it's a much shorter distance, right? So people who have solar, we're finding are pretty easy to kind of get to move over there. Secondly, anyone who's in the process of getting solar, so more and more what were traditionally pure solar installers are now solar and heat pumps, right? And so there we're seeing good success there with a completely bundled system. Really interesting, I think that, and I guess maybe not that surprising, but it always interests me when we see it happen so strongly, is that there's a real strong correlation between people who own electric cars and people interested in electrifying their home. So with the popularity of electric car ownership, and that being sort of ahead of what many people projected, the existence of an electric car turns out to be a really good targeting thing. Obviously, and I've said this repeatedly here, anyone who's got motivations around climate change, the thing about this is in social media, Facebook and Instagram and so forth, very easy to target people in this category, right, that are green leaning. And so sometimes, I can imagine people on this call being concerned, well, if I seem like I am positioning my company as too green, what's that going to do for all of my normal folks that may not be motivated that way? Is it going to be offensive to them? And so, the thing about social media advertising is you can really hone in and put your messages only in front of those that want it. And then lastly, younger and new homeowners, and particularly those that are in the younger category, right? So that sort of newly formed households, younger kind of technology folks. Last thing I wanted to say is just one example here. And again, this is a company in California. And so big caveat here is that this is, this is the state of California, which as I described, is got lots of incentives and a lot of sort of momentum in this category. But this is a Larry Waters company, 30-year, HVAC veteran, just wanted to create a new company and put himself, went all in on electrification. So named the company Electrify My Home, and really is just went all in on that concept, and he's thriving, right? The phone is sort of just ringing off the hook. So let me stop there. Ed, any questions from you or questions from anybody? Happy to take them.
Yeah, Peter, can you hear me?
I hear you well.
Okay, great. So one, thanks so much. Again, super interesting. A couple things that come to mind. Or I guess one thing I'd like to say, to the audience here is, we are not at NEIF and Peter as well. We're not here to say, beat the drum, everybody needs to go electric. We're not sort of endorsing that and saying this is what everyone needs to do. I mean, we work with companies across the spectrum and fuel dealers, and we respect the business that everyone is doing. And we know there's also a lot of very strong opinions about, can the grid handle electrification, these sort of higher level things that worry a lot of contractors, and the issues that can happen. So we are totally aware of that. The point of this was to really give our contractors out there an insight again into what the homeowners are thinking. And then as Peter moved later in his presentation, and for me, is okay, well, if you are a company that wants to take advantage of this, if you are doing more heat pumps or you are moving that direction, this data can really help you inform your marketing. And your marketing is what leads to your sales. And so that's always how I'm thinking about it. And so I think I'd like to say a couple things. One, as a business owner, if you're on the phone here, or as a salesperson at your company, I think that's what's most important. And you are able to, if you worked with a company like Energy Circle, they can do that for you, and they're incredibly, good at finding those homeowners who are searching for these things in your area, and you will get more leads, right? But also you can do some of this on your own. One thing I find interesting is that induction stove line, and I know there was like a huge article or something came out federally saying, oh, this is causing cancer, and now everyone's freaking out. My mom texted me, she's like, switch your stove, and I'm like, it's that overreaction, but it does seem to be growing. Just that. So I think, do you think that's going to be a business opportunity for, non-new construction, like contractors, plumbers, electric contractors, if they wanted it?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Ed. The two things that are driving it is, all the attention now to the sort of, indoor air quality implications of gas stoves. And, there's also a fairly, sort of robust bunch of like super foodie people are like, induction stoves are awesome. I just have a little cook plate, and the thing is, it is amazing. So, I think that the question remains, appliance installation is not a particularly exciting business, right? So, so I think, the point here, and this is I think sort of a good segue to this, is one thing we do know is that people who are starting to be interested in this are very confused about like, if I wanted to electrify over time in my house, what do I do first? Like what's the rank order of what I ought to do? And so in that sense, I think, contractors that want to take advantage of this need to in some way become the trusted advisor for like the pathway, right? Because, maybe in wealthy places like Princeton, New Jersey, and Bay Area, California, people are going to like write a, $40,000 check and get all this stuff done at once. In other places, they're going to say, let's put one ductless in, and then after that, we'll do this. And after that, we'll do this. And people really, we know this very concretely from all of our clients, people are dying for help on that plan. And at some point in that plan, the induction stove, comes up, right? And and it's also, by the way, oftentimes the last thing, right? People are like, no, I'm not giving up my gas stove. I'll change anything else, but I'm not giving up my gas stove. So I'm glad you said what you said at the beginning, Ed. I mean, I think, we don't come at this from an ideological standpoint. The point is that there is a growing demand for this particular, in this field. And what I just want to do is help people take advantage of it. If this is going to be a thing in your market, which I believe it will be everywhere, right? Even though it's kind of popular in pockets of the country now, there are pieces of this that are happening. And back to the original point, which is it's a darn good job, right? If you get the job to completely electrify a home, and you add some envelope work into that, you're talking about $30,000 and $40,000 and $50,000 ticket sizes, which is awesome. So,
no, totally, 100%. And I do believe, as it's funny, I was doing a sales training the other day, and I had one of my quotes that I really like. Selling is teaching and teaching is selling, and
Yeah.
educated buyer buys on value proposition, or uneducated buys on buys on price, and definitely seeing the contractors that are really starting to move heat pumps specifically, that they are very locked into being able to explain it to the homeowners and have them understand it, because that's such a critical part of that sales process. If you're going to be doing it not just thinking like it's going to fly off, people really want to understand, is this okay? Is it going to work? What happens in this scenario and that scenario? And so I think that's really important.
Yeah. All this whole, one of the things, I showed a little bit of it, but, whenever there's a new technology like this, or a complicated, sort of technology, that, it is always, we call it question, very question focused, right? So much of the search is, will this heat pump work in my climate? What actually, and including like, how does a heat pump work? Right. But it's fascinating to see the evolution of those questions, because in the beginning, for 4 years ago, whatever, when we really started tracking, the nature of the questions was very much like based on distrust about whether these things really work, right? Like people are just like, wait a second, no way this thing's going to provide heat in minus 13 degrees, right? The questions have now evolved much more to like, people are over the hump, right? They're not questioning whether it works or not. They want to know, how much does it cost? What's my electricity bill going to be? Who do I choose who's going to be a good installer, right? So the nature of the questions, to your point, as sales guru, is much more towards buying, questions as opposed to kind of research questions, right?
Yeah, very interesting. So we got about 5 minutes. I do want to take any Q&A. Peyton, are you seeing any questions that have been chatted in? If you do have questions, chat them in here, and Peyton will battle them off here to Peter.
Yeah, I haven't seen any new ones yet. So just give it a minute or so if anyone has any to pop in the chat.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, one thing that just also comes to mind on the how big of a shift this is if you just sort of think about, HVAC companies in the past. If you're coming into a home and you're putting in a new AC, or you're putting in a new furnace or a new boiler, there haven't been those questions for so many years. It's like, hey, it's not working. Oh, I'm gonna put in a new one, and great, put it in. Like, what's no one? And now it's a very different game, which I think goes back to the point of some of these first movers, people that are creating content, being really educated on it, and then having that be their standpoint, and certainly being able to back it up when they're in the home and sell it. They're going to get a lot of business, and they already are starting to.
There's some amazing stories of people that have grown. I know you've seen it, Ed, in Maine, because of how running the program here, but out of kind of whole cloth, these heat pump only companies have come. The number one installer in the state of Maine was formerly a appliance shop, in rural Maine, and transform themselves, and these are $20 million businesses now, in a short period of time. So I think that like those opportunities really do exist.
Yeah, the potential for growth is there. Peyton, you seen anything else? If not, I'll wrap it up here.
No, I think we're good to go.
Great.
Okay, great. So again, just want to thank Peter Troast from Energy Circle here for joining us. I want to thank everybody taking out some time here on St. Patrick's Day, March Madness. Hopefully everybody has a green beer tonight, pun intended. I would like to say, if you didn't hear at the beginning, that Energy Circle is a company that NEIF thinks very highly of. We certainly give them our endorsement. If you are looking for website services, like a new website, or marketing, lead acquisition, customer acquisition, content creation, they do a phenomenal job, and so please reach out to them. And other than that, I would say we are good to go. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you very much for having me, Ed. Great to be here.
All right, talk soon. See you, everyone.